This is the Intuitive Leadership Mastery Podcast. What would it take for you to double your profits and half your stress with your intuition? Learn how with your host, Michael Light.
Welcome back to the show. I'm here with Dan Andrews, co-host of the world-famous Tropical MBA podcast and co-founder of several businesses. He's a long-term entrepreneur, and he does it in a special flavor because he's location independent, coming to us today from, I believe, Barcelona in Spain.
Yes, Michael, thanks for having me.
Yes. So coming up, we're going to be looking at what exactly is intuition and how can you use it in your business, or even is it useful in business? This is a question we want to consider. And how originally did we get attracted to intuition, even if it's sometimes the pet that wants to bite us, it seems like. And we'll look at is muscle memory intuition and some sports analogies that help with business and intuition. And what are some of the things that many people believe intuitively but are actually false? And we'll also have a look at whether intuition helps or hinders in hiring. And controversially, we'll look at dating and business. Are they really the same thing? So
you're going to have to stick around you're going to have to stick around at the end of the show to hear our salacious thoughts on dating. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I appreciate you coming on the show. And we were asking before we hit the record button, what exactly is this intuition thing?
Yeah.
So let's talk about that.
Yeah. Let me ask a few questions of you, because that's maybe just give me a little bit of background on how you discovered this concept and what attracted you to it. That's the first thought that occurs to me, because I don't think I've had the same sort of attraction to it. And I'm curious about that.
Well, I think for me, I had a small car accident in 2001, had a little whiplash, got some therapy. The health insurance on the physiotherapy ran out. And then I started doing yoga because one of the therapists said, hey, you can't come to me, but you could look after yourself a bit better. And then that, I think, started me opening up to hearing my intuition more. And around that time, I started going to a bunch of personal growth workshops that I paid for, as opposed to trying to find free stuff. So there was a whole acceleration in my life there. And also, I was very keen to have my business make more money. I nearly said have my money make more business, which would be the wrong way around.
Which would be pretty amazing if you can figure that out, by the way.
Yes. Well, often I think when I said that phrase, I was thinking I get the same amount of money, but I have to do twice of the amount of work to get it, which in early years, my business, that sometimes seemed to be the way, if not entirely going backwards. So I was interested, how can I improve my business? And that was a lot of the motivation there. And this was just one of the tools for doing that. I mean, I was interested in all kinds of ways. I read lots of books on business and sales and marketing and hiring, and went to workshops on how do you read people and, how can you predict the future, or, various other things. So those are some of the ways I got into it. And, I sort of think there was a kind of graph of intuition. It kind of went up and up. So in the early days, I didn't hear it so well. And I would go to other people. Like for hiring, one of the things I've done is use handwriting analysis. I'd go to a graphologist and have them, as well as me, interviewing the people and reading their resume and giving them tests and doing all the rational mind stuff, and having the team interview people as well, so they got other viewpoints. I'd also get this handwriting analysis done, and they'd give me, other things on the person. But then around 2009, I did yoga teacher training, and that did all kinds of things, because it wasn't just learning how to teach yoga. You go through like every possible pretzel and position, and I think a lot of stuff gets stuck in our bodies, or it certainly did for me. And going through these different meditations and postures released a lot of stuff. And around there, I got this strong intuition to move from Maryland and go to the Andes, except I didn't know anyone in the Andes. So I just asked a lot of friends and eventually found someone in Bolivia who said, yeah, come visit me in La Paz and I'll help you get an apartment. And I was terrified to get on the plane because my rational mind was like, what are we going to do there? Is it safe? I mean, isn't Bolivia dangerous? Isn't that where Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid got shot? I mean, but as soon as the plane landed, I was happy with it. So I trusted my intuition enough to overcome the fear.
I jumped ahead because I knew that you were happy with the decision. I'm curious, like, do you now have a narrative about what the world or yourself was trying to say to you? Or was it just merely some good sense was occurring to me that I needed to make a change? Or is this part of a bigger kind of thing going on?
I think it was that particular, both of those things, I think, were my higher self giving me that message. I think I did have that car accident so I could have that experience of getting into the yoga. It kind of tipped me into taking it more seriously. And same thing with having that intuition to go to the Andes and actually acting on it. Because, I think everyone gets intuitive messages, but the difference is, do we hear them? Do we act on them?
Yeah.
So, and the more I act on the intuitive messages, the stronger I hear them. Well, that's my experience. It's like reading marketing stuff in books. You could read 1,000 books on marketing, but if you don't actually change how you do your marketing, it doesn't really change your business.
How often do you end up being disappointed by your intuition?
Well, I don't know. I really get disappointed by it. I mean, maybe a related question is, how accurate is it?
Yeah.
Because I think the sub question there is, does the intuition produce the results I want? And then I go more into curiosity. If my intuition said hire this person and then they don't work out, I'm kind of curious, well, what happened there? Did I misread the intuitive info? Was there something else there? Did the situation shift?
You could also have this goal, I really want to grow my business.
Mm-hmm.
And then your intuition doesn't give a shit about that goal. And so it's telling you to move to the Andes or to help people in your neighborhood, or it could be telling you a number of things that you're not listening to. And then, in other words, you could be trying to shoehorn yourself into a type of person that maybe you're not, and trying to employ it to dark means, so to speak.
Employ
have you ever
your
seen
intuition
that?
to dark means?
Right, because it's possible that maybe the only reason you want to double your business is so that you can look good at a family reunion, for example, or that you can show off to your peers, or that you can feel a sense of validation. And I'm wondering if, in your experience, I know you've had so many guests on the show, is the intuition, is it the thing that is it part of the problem in that respect? If you need, if you're doing things for the wrong reasons or for really harmful reasons, or could it point you in a healthier direction?
Well, I think intuition is just a tool. We have, in our life and business, we have many things available. We have our rational minds, we have our intuition, we have our emotions, we have books or courses we can access, and it's just like screwdrivers and saws and spanners and all the other stuff you might have in a toolbox. And
how do you know what a spanner is? Are you a former carpenter?
Yes, my name is Michael, and I used to be a carpenter.
I'll believe it.
Yeah, but I try not to be too attached to I must use my intuition. It's just a tool to give me extra info when making business or life decisions. The rational mind is another tool. So, and if you want to use your saw to make a bright and shiny object to make your family reunion happy, there's nothing wrong with that,
Right. That makes sense.
Or if you want to do it to change the world and end world hunger, that's cool too,
Right.
Why do we have to judge that? It's all good stuff. I mean, you're getting to practice soaring. You're getting to practice using your rational mind or your intuition or whatever other tools you happen to have in your toolbox.
Well,
what's the reason we incarnated? Why did you incarnate, Dan?
Well, I guess I was thinking about it because like the intuition could potentially be particularly useful in like getting us out of a bad situation. So that bad situation might be one that you think is good. So in the case, I was just thinking about that where you're mentioning going to the Andes or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Like you might think that it's really great to have a big, powerful business, or you might think it's great to like live in a certain place, but then your intuition could be challenging that subtly for you. And if you listen to it, it could be that where it could have a tremendous impact on your life, where you trust that voice and you say, actually, all the things that I've like stated for myself aren't, maybe there's a point of resistance against that, because if you've built this like rational web of like why it's good to be, so-and-so or this type of person. And then, in other words, that's where it could be tremendously powerful, and not just another tool, but it could be particularly interesting or particularly useful.
Right, because it might be the tool in your toolbox that's the flashlight, right?
Yeah,
you might be bumbling around in the dark saying, yeah, make my business bigger. Yeah, have a better logo. Yeah, let's get a bigger office because that looks impressive.
Exactly.
Let's buy the latest model car. And then you find this flashlight that's been beeping at you from your toolbox, and it says, hey, maybe you need to be doing something slightly different with your business.
Well, that's
maybe
where
focus on this.
One of the things that I've heard, and the problem is it can cut both ways, but I've heard a lot of entrepreneurs speak like that when they're talking about identifying new opportunities. Like their intuition told them 5 years ago that this was what they were made for, that this was going to be great. But instead what they did was they read a blog that had a course and they signed up for it, or they thought like, well, Dan Andrews says podcasting is the greatest, so I started a podcast instead of doing that thing that and I get blamed for that all the time. That's why I mentioned that example, because people come up to me and they're like, F you, Dan Andrews. But that's interesting because I remember times like that in my career where I just felt like something was really valuable. And had I waited for the world to agree in terms of money, checks and balances, spreadsheets, the marketplace, the news media, my friends and family, then I would have missed an opportunity.
Right. I think that's a great insight. And the problem is that so many entrepreneurs, business people are so busy and so afraid to have silence in their life to hear those messages or to act on them that they just keep on going down the same treadmill, and they may be a little stuck on it.
What's your lifestyle like, Michael? I'm sorry, but I'm just curious because I'm seeing the background, but your head's in the way of all these books, and there's a Yoda on the wall.
I'll move there's some books.
It's like a bric-a-brac of fascinating items. Do you keep a busy?
I'll just bring Mr. Yoda. I don't know if you can read that.
Do not try. Do or do not. There is no try.
Yeah,
classic words of wisdom from a small being.
Yeah, very successful entrepreneur and Jedi Knight. Whoops, I may have to put that back later. Oh, well. I'm kind of constrained by my headset. I'll put Mr. Yoda back. But that's an important... I have that on the wall to remind me not to try to do things. Either do it or don't do it. but I don't language, I'm going to try to learn yoga, or I'm going to try to do this new marketing video, or I'm going to try to create a new book or a blog or whatever. I'm either going to do it and actually have it happen, or I'm not going to do it. And that's not just for me. That's something I used to have that when I had an office. I now have a virtual company, to answer your question about lifestyle. So I move around the world. I spend about half my time in Peru, and then spread the rest between the US, Europe, and Southeast Asia. And I've got two businesses, a computer software business and intuition training business. So
why do you do the intuition training? Because you don't need to. Your software.
Need to.
So what was the spark?
My intuition said I need to be doing this, and it wasn't entirely clear how to make it a business. And right now, financially, it's being supported by the other business. But I do get a lot of joy out of doing it. I guess you call it a passion project. But I think it has the opportunity to be financially successful, because I think there's a whole wave of change happening in the world, and just people are, how I would put it is, they're increasing their vibration. They're becoming more positive and more conscious overall, and that includes entrepreneurs. And part of this in the entrepreneurial and business world is being open to using our intuition and doing it in an open way. It's not just that you go into a little dark closet and then check in on your gut on a decision. You can openly share in a meeting with your staff that, I've got a gut feeling that this marketing plan is not the way to go, and we need to relook at it. Or this candidate for this position, my intuition says, yes, this person will work out and bring us profit and joy over the next year.
That's interesting, because I've been in that situation, and it's an interesting rhetorical move actually to make in a room full of people, because the common way we communicate with each other is through the dialectic. So particularly in a meeting. So it's like, if there's 6 people there, what you're trying to do is, like, you have a feeling about the way the business should go. And the social contract kind of suggests that you need to basically make the case. Mm-hmm. And so if you show up and you're kind of like the senior person, you're the owner, and you say, I have a gut feeling here. It's a card that either you need to reset the way you talk, most companies talk, or you need to use it sparingly, because it's also sort of tyrannical in a way, where you would say, I have a gut feeling. I need you all to trust this, because I can't explain it to you, but I'm very experienced. I trust my gut, and I need, basically the implication is that now you all have to follow that. Right? Because we're not having a dialectic anymore.
What about if you invited everyone else to share what their intuition was?
Well, let's just
why
use
does it have to be the dictator of intuition in the room?
Here's why.
Not be a co-creation?
Well, let's just use the hypothetical, which is quite common in that sense, which is like I mentioned in the value example. You generally wouldn't need to resort to that unless you were the only one who had that intuition. So that's a useful hypothetical, as it happens all the time in business, is that wait, these people, you can make any judgment you want. Let's just say the hypothetical is you're the only person who has that intuition, which will often be the case if you're the owner of your business. So now there's a whole bunch of literature about this. People say things like, well, you need to let your employees make their own mistakes and develop their own intuition. So this could run, this is an interesting, like you said, as business people, we're so far away from this that if you bring it to the table in your business, it could be a big challenge in that particular hypothetical. Yeah.
It definitely could be a challenge. It's a moment of vulnerability. I was talking to Tim Cullenly on this show the other day, and I asked him what take for all entrepreneurs to openly use their intuition? And his answer on that is they'd have to be okay being vulnerable.
I disagree with that. So in the hypothetical that I just set up, and look, I'm using a limited hypothetical, but like that's not a vulnerable move. That's a dictatorial move. Like I can say like, look, everybody share their intuition here, but my intuition is different from yours. And that's what we're going to do because I think it's the right thing to do. So there's nothing vulnerable about that in my mind. So I only mention it because I can, and it might not be a good hypothetical, but because I can relate to it very much. Like I've been in a lot of meetings, and maybe this isn't my intuition or it could be my experience or whatever, where I feel I see something. I feel like there's something to be done, but that to get everybody on the same page is I think a situation that a lot of entrepreneurs find themselves in.
So, I mean, if I was in that situation, first of all, I'd ask, is this thing I have coming from my intuition, or is it my emotions, or is it my rational mind, or is it some pattern, some belief system that is running through me from previous experiences? Like, often, for example, in hiring, people have what's called scarring in their hiring. In other words, they made a bad hire in the past with a certain kind of person, and now they're gun shy about hiring the same kind of thing. But that new person may be just fine. It's just that you've got a previous emotional scar
for sure
dealing with that kind of individual.
So the question that's on the table
is to get conscious, where is this knowledge in me coming from? And being in a meeting with a bunch of other people is probably not the best situation to get clear on where that info is coming from in the first place and what the intuition is. I mean, one of the ways I think of intuition, it's sort of like I'm driving in my car and the intuition is a little boy or girl in the back seat whispering things to me about, hey, Michael, turn left at the next intersection. You'll avoid the traffic. It's a good idea. And meanwhile, I've got the GPS rational mind, blaring away. And I've got the loud brothers of ego and follow the crowd yapping away. Plus, I have the radio turned up full crank on some rock channel, right? And I'm not really hearing that little intuitive voice.
Right.
So first of all, a business meeting where there's a bunch of other people and everyone's discussing things, it's really hard to hear intuition.
So then sorry, I mean, this is just how my brain works. When you gave that example, I thought, so let's say you can hear the intuition and say you've practiced that, which is a whole nother conversation on how to do that. Is it always right?
It depends what question you've asked it, Dan. I think it is always right. Like, here's the thing, and let's jump right to the end of the episode and reveal the dating thing, just to, shake things up a bit. You've probably seen friends who ask themselves, is this person going to be a good person to date, right? Is this going to be a good boyfriend or girlfriend? And then they proceed to date them, and it turns out into a clusterfuck disaster dating situation, right?
Sure.
But if they look back after it's ended and they say, was this good for me? Maybe they suddenly become aware of some family dynamic that they cleaned up, or they just stopped being a doormat to people, or whatever the thing is. And you could say from a certain point of view, yeah, that was the perfect person for you to date at that point in your life because you had this growth spurt afterwards.
Right.
And the same thing in business. Is this a good person to hire? Well, maybe they were a disaster zone, right? But then you realized, hey, I really need to change my hiring process, and our onboarding of staff needs to be different. And there are just some people I'm just going to say no to,
right.
This personality type is not a fit, and I'm now 200% clearer on our company culture. And I'm not going to take crap time after time. If someone does a major screw up, they're out the door. And if they do a minor screw up, I'm going to have this process in place that deals with it.
Right.
So were they a good person? Is this person good to hire? Absolutely. But did this person bring me joy and profit? No.
Right.
So that's the example of a better question. Will this candidate bring me profit and joy in the next 12 months would be a question that my intuition could clearly answer.
Right.
Will this person to date bring me joy and happiness? Oh, apparently not.
Right. But the question that it doesn't answer well is, should I date them in the first place?
Well, it depends what your goal is. Is your goal to have the most growth? In personal growth and spiritual growth? Is your goal to have happiness and joy and a wonderful home life?
Right.
If you're hiring someone, is your goal that they fit in well with the team and they contribute to the profit and joy? What's the goal? And I think in business, and that comes back to the question you asked earlier, are you here to make something to make your family think you're doing clever things, or your school friends to think that, or are you here for personal growth? Are you here to change the world? Or are you here to make $1 billion? Or, what is the goal of your business? And I think underneath every entrepreneur, the goal is personal growth. Why really do we do business? It's to grow in a certain way, or certainly that seems to be the motivation.
That's interesting. It's definitely there's a high correlation between that desire, and it's almost when people decide to start their first business, the first thing they do is go out and buy a bunch of personal growth books. And it's kind of a strange thing, because well, you're going to grow a business, you're not going to grow yourself, but there's such a huge identity overlap, it seems, between your business and yourself. Yeah.
So I think the better question you ask, the better answer you're likely to get from your intuition. And not being conscious of the question you're asking is a recipe for getting poorer quality answers.
That makes sense. And that's a different understanding that I had coming into the conversation, because I made the assumption that you wouldn't need, the intuition would be the thing that you don't provoke or you don't ask questions of, right? I kind of thought that your intuition was this thing that was what's already in you somehow. But of course, I have a bunch of assumptions about it. I don't know that much about it. But you're saying that you actively go in there and say, what is the quiet voice think about this issue? Or what could be revealed to me?
What? First of all, as you alluded to earlier, I create situations each day so I can hear the quiet voice. And then I do things to amp up the volume on the quiet voice.
Can we talk about those things?
Well, sure. I'm sure you do them yourself. Things like meditating or going for a walk or taking a shower, and being able to, so many people get great business ideas in the shower or when they wake up. Why is that? Because they finally got quiet instead of having the TV on or the radio or listening to 17 podcasts simultaneously, or, being busy.
For me, it's walking. Somehow when I walk, my brain is more productive than when I sit. So I pace a lot around the house when I'm trying to write something or come up with an idea.
And I have a business friend. She typically, when we have phone calls, she paces around her office to get better ideas.
What kinds of things do you teach your students, or do you facilitate them, or what sorts of things happen in those interactions? I'm curious about how you coach people.
Yeah, I certainly will give suggestions, but I'll also use the what would it take question to have them, because that's a way to access your intuition. Ask yourself, what would it take to get this goal? What would it take to hire an ideal candidate? What would it take to increase my profits 10% this week? Or whatever the question is. So anytime you've got a business problem, I suggest they use the what would it take. And then I use other tools to amplify that. And look at the energy of the situation, because often there's there's the physical reality of your business, but also usually there's some kind of energy in there that needs to shift to get to where you want to go. Right. And then there may be, family patterns or, childhood trauma that you have that's getting in the way of getting to the goal that you say you want to get to.
Right.
Often if a goal, if something's not happening easy in my business, I know there's something in me that's creating that at some level.
I'm curious about coaching because I've tried it a few times, and I think that I'm pretty horrible at it for whatever reason. I don't know. It's
horrible at giving it or horrible at receiving it?
Probably both. I'm not sure about it. I've thought more on because people come to me for coaching occasionally, and sometimes I'll go on a phone call or whatever. And it's hard. It's hard to get people to change, I guess. It's hard, and it takes a really long time for me. So I guess I always get frustrated with that. Like, gosh, this is hard. It's taking forever. So, and it also seems like you mentioned, like if it's a pattern that you're in or childhood trauma, well, that does seem to be the case in a lot of situations in business. Like we were talking about the overlap of your identity and your business. It can be the overlap of your practices and the results. And so I've been encountered with that many, many times. And that's part of the reason that I don't know if you remember that slide at DCBKK. There's an event that we were at many years ago. And it was like, if you're less than $100,000 in revenue, you're still like in the psychological problems realm. And then if you get greater than that, you're in like a marketing problems realm. And if you're greater than that, you're in like a human resources realm. And that's one of the things that kind of always struck with me about trying to facilitate change in entrepreneurs and businesses. Is that, it strikes me why intuition is a powerful way to speak to people in that way, because a lot of it is us that's holding these things back.
I think all of it is us holding these things back, because either it's us directly, or in the past we hired people into our business that weren't a fit for where we wanted to go now, or we didn't structure things to support the kind of business we want. I mean, I was at the DC Austin event where Laura Roda gave her talk on how she paints a clear picture for her staff, and she deliberately, consciously created that business, which is the third business she's created, I believe. And the first two businesses kind of sucked because she either had to spend all her time making the money, or every time she took her hand off the controls of the business, it stopped growing.
Right.
And she said, wait a minute, this third business, I want it to be able to be successful and grow, even if I'm not in the office making it grow or doing stuff.
Right.
And that was a total change of mindset. And her business, I forget exactly how much of it. Didn't she go from $0 to $1 million recurring revenue within a year in that third business?
I think she's doing much better than that at this point. Yeah.
Well, she's now in her second or third year of the business, so
right.
She is doing much better. But she went from $0 to $1 million, and she took 3 months off for pregnancy leave in the middle of that. And that's impressive, right? There's this whole myth in entrepreneurship that you're supposed to hustle and work really hard, and that's the only way to make a business succeed.
Right.
And I think she and some other people I've met through the DC are examples of that doesn't have to be the case.
That's interesting, because if I were asked, yeah, that's interesting. It seems to me like my core beliefs is that the hard work element is pretty highly correlated with successful businesses. And that's part of that stacking. Like, I don't think she could have done that in the first year or the second. I think it was like in the third or fourth year, yeah, you can like take your foot off the gas. Because a part of it is like that business relied on her seeing something that no one else in the world saw. I believe, at least. And it's hard at that stage. I don't know. Here's an interesting question. Do we know entrepreneurs who like had that vision and just hired people right away? who were able to see it too, and then just like almost immediately stepped away?
Well, I think she helped her staff see the vision. That's what she talks about, is that she painted a clear picture for where they were going and what it was about. So
sure. You have to talk to her about that. I don't want to speculate too much about. Oh, God. Okay, you just saw the real Dan Andrews. So
you okay?
Yeah, I'm okay. I have a difficult training schedule this week, so I was on the road for 3 hours this morning, and I just cramped
on
up.
A bicycle.
Yeah. So I have.
So let's
compression
now we brought
socks
the bicycle. Now we brought the bicycle up. Let's switch gears into intuition and sports.
Okay.
We talked about. How much of this is muscle memory in our business. You just have to practice a whole bunch before you can get to do it intuitively.
It's a better question for you. I mean, I got my own ideas about it, but you tell me. I mean, because that's an interesting.
You mentioned that you used to play tennis, and maybe you still do play it.
Well, here's the thing. Let's say, like, if you're a unexperienced entrepreneur and you don't really know what you're doing, I think it's fair to say we all know people that don't know how to yet start a business. How can their intuition be useful to them? Because that strikes me as like and this is why I brought up the sports analogies, because is intuition only valuable to people who've practiced a lot? So there's something that I learned about golf many years after playing it, which is that most golfers, and we wrote this down, my guess is it's about 95% of people that are on a golf course are not using their wedges correctly, which is the majority clubs that you use on a golf course. The same is true of a similar number with tennis players, because the correct way to use the tool of, and this is maybe it gets back to what you're saying about asking the correct questions of these tools, is not the intuitive way that an amateur would think about it. So if you pick up a tennis racket and I say, like, get this ball over the net, the way you're going to do it is not how the most effective way to do it. And that, to me, like, you're kind of at an inroads there. Like, it would take you a really long time to get to the correct answer, in other words. So there's a great deal of training that goes into undoing that knowledge, or undoing that, I don't know if you would call that an intuition, but that's like sort of your first attempt, and getting to a point where you can have a great deal of practice under your belt, so that you can trust yourself to make sort of quick decisions on the fly, because you've learned technique. So I think how you hold a golf club or a tennis racket, if we gave the 3-year-old Dan Andrews a golf club, assuming he had one sized, he'd probably hold it better than the 20-year-old Dan Andrews, because what makes you hold something in a certain way or do something in your business a certain way? You probably observed other people doing it. Maybe sure. Not consciously so, but you probably watched a lot of tennis on TV, or I don't know where you picked it up. And you've got like a default way of doing it. And the same in business. You probably I'm assuming you went to high school and then probably did a degree. And you probably got a shitload of training about this is how you're supposed to make decisions. And this is how you're supposed to deal with money. Mm-hmm. Or in the case of money, don't deal with it. Not much. Yeah. Not a whole lot of training in that respect, for sure. No money training.
I know. Isn't that incredible that's like one of the more important things? Money and health and relationships are 3 of the things that determine people's happiness, I would say, in the modern Western world. How much classroom instruction is given on those? Basically zip.
Right. And well, you have to go back and consider your teachers and ask yourself if you'd want that sort of instruction.
Well, maybe you'd want to have an expert on relationships come into the school and help on that, or an entrepreneur to come into the school and do that. But
sure.
There's a lot of of mindset stuff that happens in schools. And then when we start our first business, if you've kept all that indoctrination, it's going to get in your way. It's not so much that you don't have that little voice. It's that you've got so much junk in the car. It's like you filled your car with boxes and boxes of shit. And the little voice is kind of covered up.
Fair enough. For me,
but I think if you had someone who was a kid, they were a young kid and they were doing an entrepreneurial thing, often they're pretty good at running a business. If they're like a 3 or 5 year old kid, they're very creative and imaginative, and they're really in touch with their intuition. And maybe they need a little training to understand how to, how this money thing works or whatever. But then we train it out of doing them. And I've had some friends who've been in the unschooling movement. I don't know if you've come across that, but it's beyond homeschooling. In homeschooling, the parent is the teacher. In unschooling, the child says, hey, I'm interested in something, and then the parent facilitates. So like the child may say, hey, I'm interested in learning how to program video games, or I'm interested in learning how to write my own music. And then the parent helps provide the information and the tools to make it easier for them to learn that skill. But the point is that the child themselves is motivated. So instead of being in school where you must learn mathematics now between 11 a.m. and 12 p.m. and English between these times, and you're not really motivated, now you've got I'm passionate about writing a book, so I'm going to learn better English grammar and I'm going to learn tricks of doing that.
Right.
Or I'm going to create. I mean, I have a friend he's 14 years old and he started his own business. He was making money and he was doing SEO things, and he wasn't being forced to do it. He was like, "This is really cool. I want to learn this."
Sure.
What a difference! And then that makes it much easier to hear your intuition when you're full of passion and you don't have a bunch of beliefs in the way that make it harder. So
sure.
Coming back to your question, is it possible for someone out of the gate to listen to their intuition and create a business that doesn't involve them working incredibly long hours? I think it is. Is that common right now? No. Because we've set up a system of education designed to turn out automatons who will work as employees in factories and in the military, right? Why was education created in the United States? About
I agree with
120 years ago. It was designed to create good soldiers and good factory employees.
Sure. I agree with that.
And still is.
That's true.
Because if you're a factory owner or a general of an army, do you want people who are listening to their intuition and are coming up with creative ideas? Well, these days, maybe you do, but back then you didn't.
Sure. I agree with that.
I think I went off on a slight rant tangent.
Well, I'm trying to decide whether I should start talking about how much I hated school or not.
Oh, apps. Sure.
I think I'm going to have the same level of vitriol as you are expressing. I mean, I don't have anything great to say about my formative education, really. I don't think.
But just imagine if either you or some other child didn't go through that kind of schooling and they wanted to create their own enterprise.
Well, so I can imagine that. So there's this great book that I loved as a kid. It's called Ishmael. It's written by this guy named Daniel Quinn. And it was really influential on me. He also had this book called The Story of B. And this is like when I was very young, I read these books. And he proposed this idea, essentially, of apprenticeship, which is that you learn by doing, and that these things are know-hows and that you learn from the master, and that you follow your passion, and that you just don't need school. Like if you just let kids go figure it out, they will figure it out. And to me, this is very appealing. As you can see, it's manifested itself later in my life. Excuse me. And part of the reason I think this is so fascinating is that I think entrepreneurship specifically is a skill set as well. And that's one that I learned by doing it. Yes, I did uncover kind of a creative, or I seek novelty. I like to make things. But I also think that there's a great deal of skill involved. and that skill for me was learned in the sort of, I was blind to these skills. I didn't have them within me at all. I had potential to learn them. And so that to me is a very important source of knowledge as well, is know-how and the practice of doing the work. And that to me is something that's really stuck with me, not only through those books, but in my uneducation as well, from following schedules and listening to authority and all that. But that doing the craft, doing the work itself is as a source of knowledge, as opposed to reading accounts of the knowledge, which is something that I'm also extraordinarily passionate about. In fact, maybe more so. And that's important to note, that particularly for people listening to podcasts and people reading our blogs and stuff like that, is that's only a very small part of the bargain, I think. If you want the knowledge to execute things like how to make sales calls, how to become a developer, how to do like really high-end skill sets that are super valuable in our society, you just can't read about it and get that knowledge, And so that's something that I think about when I think about intuitive knowledge, is that you make 100 sales calls, and then you make 500, and then you make 1,000, and then all of a sudden you hear a client on the phone kind of say a certain thing, and it's all of a sudden, boom, I know where this is going. I can see the opportunity here. And I think that, I guess when I think about developing your intuition as an entrepreneur, I think about that repetitive action, or that with conscious action, of course, but also putting yourself through it many times, so that you can see all the different small facets and you can react quickly when you do see them. So I don't know. That was a bit of a rant myself. There you go.
I think there's great value in practicing, and you can also say, what would it take to accelerate my learning for this skill, whether it's sales or programming or managing people or creating a vision for a team or whatever. What would it take to learn this skill 10 times faster, and see what your intuition says to you? And in the case of sales calls, some of it is being conscious. I mean, I've been through a bunch of sales training. I did Sandler sales training and a few other ones. And one of the things they want you to do is to do a debrief after each call. You kind of write down, what were the good things I did, what went wrong. So you become conscious of what you did in that sales call, so you can do it better the next time, instead of just blindly repeating it. So that's a way to accelerate the learning. And just meditating on it. What would it take to have a great sales call with this particular individual today?
And one of the maybe harder things to do would be to put yourself in a situation where you're receiving critical feedback from a master, or someone who's willing, maybe not quite a master, but someone who knows more than you. And that's a situation you can put yourself in through an apprenticeship or a job. I think many entrepreneurs, or a mastermind. And I think many entrepreneurs are loath to put themselves in this position, because it hurts sometimes to see things that you don't want to see about yourself for whatever reason. And,
why does it hurt to get that feedback about something we don't see about ourselves? Because if we could figure that out, we could grow so much faster as entrepreneurs.
Sometimes, I don't know the grand answer, but there's a smaller one that if you can rearrange the stakes, it often becomes, it's less a liability and more of an opportunity. So if the stakes are, I could double my business if I become a great salesperson. And if you can rearrange those incentives in your mind, then all of a sudden it doesn't hurt at all. You just can't wait to have somebody tell you something that you're deficient in terms of that sales call. Whereas I think if we're not as focused on what we're trying to accomplish, because a lot of us might use our businesses as like we were talking about earlier, they might use your business for a completely different aim. The goal you might do it as a recognition of self or fulfillment, or, those things can be quite complex if you're getting critical feedback. But if all of a sudden you're just trying to double your sales, or you really want to become a great salesperson, it can be a lot easier to receive the feedback. So in a mastermind setting, it wouldn't probably be wise to walk in and say, how about everybody just openly critique what I'm doing? Because then it's not as, it's harder to receive the feedback, and it's not as focused on something that you can rearrange the incentives clearly on. Like, I clearly want to do this, and I'd love to hear what I'm not seeing here. And so that's maybe a little hack for the listeners. Hopefully I said something somewhat useful to your listeners. I feel bad. I feel like I'm not, I don't want to be wasting people's time with my drivel.
I don't think you're doing that. And I think many people listening have similar concerns to you as to, how can I trust my intuition more? What exactly is this intuition thing? So it's all valuable to dig into this. And the other thing that occurs to me with practicing sales skills or hiring skills or whatever, part of that is like becoming conscious of all the steps and the subtleties in it. And part of it is being able to practice over and over, the actual mechanics of it. But I think a large chunk of it, or it certainly was for me in sales, is getting rid of a whole bunch of mental garbage and beliefs I had that selling is evil and manipulative and, all the other head trash that I brought into sales.
Totally.
And if I just attack that directly and get rid of that head trash, it just went a lot faster.
How do you do that?
Well, first thing is becoming conscious of the head trash I have.
Right.
I mean, I know when I used to do sales training, some of the classes we just write out all the beliefs we had that were getting in our way. So that's the first step. If you're not even aware that you've got the junk in your car that's getting in the way of you getting to your destination, it's hard to clean up the junk,
Sure.
And then there are many ways you can clean up head trash. I mean, I used to do EFT tapping. That was one way. Now
right.
I do more direct energy manipulation to remove it. Or you could just ask, what would it take to remove it? Because that not only accesses your intuition to say, here are ways I might remove it. It also, just by the act of asking the question, it starts to put more light onto it and start to dissolve it.
Right.
In my view.
I don't think I'm that good at it yet, but I think it's challenging for everybody listening. And that's why we're going to such great lengths to develop tactics and strategies to do something about it, And it also comes down to identification as well. Part of the reason I didn't want to do sales training is because I didn't want to identify as a salesperson.
God, my family might think I'm a salesperson.
Yeah. And that's real. And you have to ask yourself, why are you even bothering to identify with that in the first place? Or why, so there's a lot of things that can get in the way of what otherwise look like simple things on the surface, which is just sales. It's not, it seems it's like just a skill set that you can learn. But a lot of us, particularly on the internet, we're ended up here, or we avoid it because of an aversion to such things. So,
well, and some of the best salespeople I've met have been introverts, and they're very concerned about other people's feelings and what's going on. And that's why they're so good at sales, because they can really, instead of, the traditional idea of the salesperson is the loud extrovert who yaps your ear off about whatever it is they're selling, right? But in reality, the good salesperson is able to listen far more than they talk, and to really deeply understand the person's problem, and not just the surface level problem, but like, what's the problem underneath the problem they're having, and how does what they have even solve, does their company's product or service even solve that? And if it doesn't, they're honest and say, look, I can't help you, but here's some other things you could try. They're more of a consultant than a salesperson.
Totally. It's totally true. And you know this through software sales, is that the bigger check that they're writing you, the more consulting's involved. So in other words, it's a relationship. Like no one just gives you $1 million check. They give you $1 million check and then you work with them for 9 months. And at any moment, they're not going to pay you because you have some crappy terms with them because it's $1 million deal or whatever. And they can revoke the back end of the deal. So I've noticed that a lot is definitely you have to be passionate and active with your solution. And yeah, if you're just telling them bullshit the whole time, then they'll figure it out on month number 2 and they will stop paying you. And yeah, I'm thinking back now to my days as a salesperson selling basically retail services at a large scale. And it was just an incredible amount of listening and then going above and beyond constantly. And that was a sales position. I was kind of, I didn't think that. My perception of sales as a college student, as I was like evaluating career, like hypothetical careers, was so different. You know, I imagine like the boiler room stockbroker person. But if you look at the best salespeople, like everybody has that idea of the boiler room stock salesperson, but the best salespeople are actually the hedge fund managers, and they have a much subtler approach to getting people into their pipeline.
Well, to paraphrase that quote from that ancient Chinese philosopher, the best salesperson, you don't even know they were there.
Exactly.
They help you because the salesperson's there to facilitate you to make the best decision for you. That's what a good salesperson would do, even if that best decision is not buying their stuff.
Right.
It's helping people get clarity and make whatever the best decision is for them to solve whatever the problem is. And often that's figuring out what the problem is. What's the real problem?
Right. And it seems like a situation where the having an intuitive approach could be super profitable.
Yeah, and I had this a salesperson called Samantha who I interviewed on one of my case studies, and one of the things she does is if her intuition is telling her there's something false in the room or there's something that needs to be spoken, she'll speak to it, and that's a sales skill. I am getting the impression that this just isn't a good fit for you.
Right.
That's a classic sales move. Right, or I'm getting the impression that there's something that you're not speaking about. Am I off base here?
Where the high pressure one would be, I'm getting the impression that you're not willing to do what's necessary to grow your business. And I only want to deal with serious people. I remember being on the opposite end. I almost bent my leg again. Bad move. I remember being on the opposite end of that and actually like feeling bad. Like if you're at a car dealership. And totally buying into it, and feeling horrible that I wasn't the type of person that was serious about buying a car that day or whatever. And it's like, it's amazing how powerful those things can be on consumers who aren't in those situations often. Anyway, that's a divergence.
So what about hiring? Does intuition help you in your hiring or hinder it? Or
well, maybe it's a good time to talk about your hiring technique. You had a chapter in your book about this, and the problem that I have with using intuition for hiring is that I just have been wrong many times. I've been right many times, I think, and so I don't think I've gotten to a place where, I have intuitions about it, or I think I do, but I still make a lot of mistakes. I think I still make a lot of mistakes, just generally speaking, in business. So that's a long way of saying.
Do you keep a hiring journal where you like, okay, this candidate had these rational reasons for me wanting to hire them, and here's what the interview process was, and I had these gut feelings or other intuitive information about them? So you can look back to see, did your intuition, was it good or where was it bad? So you can improve it.
No, so far the most useful framework that we've found is looking past a lot of traditional indicators that it's tempting to look at charisma, whether they remind you of your best friend, whether you want to be friends with them, whether you want to have a beer with them, whether there's all these sorts of things that are very tempting to look at, whether they went to a really nice school. One of the things that is sneaky is, have they worked at a really awesome company? Have they been involved in some really awesome projects or products? Like, those are all things that are really seductive in the hiring process. And what we found is that by really trying to narrow down on what it is they've actually done and getting just super clear on that, like, has this person done? What are the actions that they've taken in their life repeatedly? What are the patterns in their work? And then asking ourselves the question, do we feel like we want to participate in, or, connect ourselves with those types of actions in the future? And that process has been so far like the one that we rely on the most, and seems to has given us the best results. That's sort of but no, we don't use I don't have like a sort of a record of all the interactions in the past.
So how do you know what kind of quality of intuitive information you are getting on the hiring?
No idea.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would suggest that as a first step to improve hiring intuition for anyone listening, to just jot it down and then review it once a month. I had this intuition about this person. Here's how it worked out. And that helps you improve it. But I like that idea of drilling down to what have they done, because that's a good. You're trying to predict what will they do for me in the future, right? That's the basics, and how they will interact with me and the rest of the team.
Yes,
those are the two of the key things.
Well, and there's a lot of. It's easy. It's hard to sometimes find that information out, which is the hard part about that process, because traditional resumes and interview processes, people more likely connect themselves to good things, as opposed to like they're the critical component of those good things happening. And so that's where all the magic happens. That's the toughest part. And it's for me, it's still something that's really difficult. That I continue to make poor judgments occasionally there.
Yeah. I mean, my belief is we really can intuitively tell how much profit someone's going to bring to our business, how much joy they're going to bring. And I can tap into that knowledge. And also I can pick up on issues they have that are going to cause problems in the business. I've certainly seen that when I used to do the handwriting analysis. I would clearly see people who had issues, because one of the beliefs I have is that business is very analogous to a family, and that the CEO is the mother or father, and the employees act as children or other roles. And people often react out the family dynamics they haven't resolved in their own personal growth and life. And I don't want drama queens or kings in my business, as an example. And I used to get those, but I learned how to pick that up, as an example.
So you used to be more comfortable with more drama, essentially, but that didn't contribute to the goals that you had for your business?
Right. I think I had a family dynamic where I was used to or comfortable with that kind of behavior, people playing the victim or whatever the exact role was. And I needed to clean that up in myself so I could see more clearly, oh, this potential employee is not going to be the best fit for the team.
I see. That's a tough one. That's a tough one to start looking at. I suspect there's a lot there.
Yeah, well, it's sort of analogous to the dating thing. When you hire someone, it's a bit like dating someone without the sex, because you're going to spend a lot of time with that person, probably. It's like a group dating situation. Right? You've got a team of people and you're all going to interact together. It's quite complicated. I mean, if you think dating is complicating, right? Hiring, you're not just going to interact one-on-one. You've got a whole team interaction plus all the customers and vendors interactions.
Totally.
It's 100 times more complicated.
That's one of the reasons why
it's hard.
One of the reasons why on our team, everybody talks to each other individually every week, and we don't have three ways, so to speak. There's a scandal, three ways, because when you add a third person to the conversation, there's already politics happening, and by politics I mean there are things that you can't say, in the presence of the third person, for good reasons, some bad reasons. And it's nice to be able to have that, one-on-one where you're just like, here's what I'm doing, here's what you're doing, here's, make your own connection, in other words, as opposed to it's always around a official meeting table. And so giving your employees a back channel, I think, is a really great thing. It's really useful for them. So, and for me too, as a manager.
Well, and with 3 people, you have twice as many relationships as you do with 2 people. Because with 2 people, you have the relationship between A and B, and then you have A's relationship with himself and B's relationship with herself. With 3 people, you've now got 6 of those lines if you draw out a little diagram.
100%.
And then you have 4 people, it goes up, even more, And by the time you get to 10 people, it's so many possible relationships and interactions, both verbally and energetically, that you can't control it rationally.
I like that visualization of it. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense to me. That's why meetings are so difficult to get things done in meetings, or it's a whole other skill set.
Yeah. And that's why I like to, before I do a meeting, set what my intention is for the meeting.
Right.
So I'm clear what I'm trying to create there. And I probably verbalize it at the meeting too. And here's the agenda, here's the goal, here's why we're here.
Right.
But so I've been in meetings where people, and this is like a little challenge to people listening, just consider having a 1 minute of silent meditation at the beginning of any business meeting to clear out any crap that's going through people's heads that they're bringing in to the meeting from somewhere else.
I like that.
And that can make quite a difference. And it can be quite uncomfortable to do. Because people
do you still go to meetings on a weekly basis?
I have one-on-ones with my direct reports. That's what I currently do.
Okay.
But I don't have an office, so I don't do in-person things unless I'm at a conference.
Nice.
But,
I rarely do either.
Yeah, but maybe a group. I know some companies have like an all-hands meeting. So
yeah, we do. We do once a week right now, but we try to keep it drama-free.
So I know we're coming up against some time constraints here.
This is the longest interview I've done in a really long time, Michael. I can't believe it. I'm loving it.
Well, we're both good interviewers, I think. So it's a bit of a co-interview. So, I have this goal to have every entrepreneur openly use their intuition because I think it would bring them more profits and more joy in their business. But also because I think if everyone used their intuition openly, they'd make less stupid-ass decisions that hurt other people, either their employees or their clients, and that hurt the planet. And I don't think you and I are going around hurting other people a lot, but certainly there are some people in business who do things that are a little twisted and hurtful.
Certainly.
So my question to you to wrap this up is, what would it take to make business intuition more openly used this year?
Well, first off, it's inspiring when you stated your message, like there's a feeling in me that was wanted to support you, or, you know what I mean? Like there's something attractive about the confidence that you have a vision for how this can help people. And so I think stating your message loud and proud and how people can get involved and help, that's That's a great contribution. That's yeah, like I said, even just like on a very emotional level, I was like, oh, that's something that's inspiring. So, yeah.
All right. Well, I'll be louder and clearer.
Yeah. Let people know that I think that you can sell intuition to people. You know, that you have an idea of what this is and how people can incorporate it and make the world and their businesses a better place. I want to know more about that. I think that you don't have to, let people like me talk about it so much. I think, I think I'd like to hear more from you about, why you believe in it and how we can use it. So that's inspiring. So I don't know.
Great.
I haven't thought this through. You're putting me on the spot. But I think
that's the idea, right?
The key insight,
to elucidate you, to bring out things you hadn't even thought of.
Yeah, and I think that was what I felt is like when, and I think everybody is different, but when you stated what you saw as the value of it, it's something that it's like a leadership element, because it's like, wow, he sees something here, and that's an attractive quality. So there you go. I think you're doing it right here.
Well, I appreciate you being on the show, Dan. If people want to find you online, what are some good ways to do that?
And there's one way to do it, tropicalmba.com. That's where my podcast is.
Excellent. Thanks
for having me. I love podding. I love doing the pods. Very few people ask me to come on their podcasts. So it's nice to be asked.
Great. All right. Thank you.
Cheers.
Get strategies and show notes at intuitiveleadershipmastery.com. What would it take to see you here next time on the Intuitive Leadership Mastery Podcast?